Here I want to point out our reconstruction filters that are used in our render. You'll notice that we have a couple of settings for this. It's first of all in the camera properties where we have this filter radius option, but also if we go into the buffers in the render properties, then as you go through each of the buffers that are selected for render, you'll notice that you have this option here, reconstruction filter. This is the filtration for the anti-aliasing. When the edges are being anti-aliased, then you might recall that we talked in the foundation section about multiple sampling inside each pixel, right, and creating smoother outcomes with more samples. Basically, this is how they are blended together, how the image at the pixel level is reconstructed. So this will be best seen if we actually use an F9 render and put the filter radius down, actually put it down really low here. Let's put it down to 0.01. And for speed and ease, you can see I've just done a little limited region render here, but let's have a nice close-up look, okay? So we can see our edges and their definition. So I'm only on 6 camera samples, so we can see that there's a little bit of AA coming in here on the floor, and of course along the edges there and the edges along the wall, right? But this is very sharp. Now let's turn that back up. Let's put it on, say, 0.8, shall we? Give that a go. And aha, what do we see? Everything has come out that little bit smoother, right? Basically, what this is doing is it's how wide a radius is the reconstruction from pixel to pixel going to be. What we'll see is if I set this to something like really big, let's take it up to, I don't know, 8 pixels, shall we? And run that again. Then, well, you can see straight away all that we're getting is it's just blurring out our image, yes? Because we're getting this very wide reconstruction. It's taking a pixel and it's blending it up to 8 pixels further across in order to create its final image like that. It's reconstructing little blocks 8 pixels in size. As such, 1 is normally as large as you'll ever go, but it does depend on the reconstruction filter that you're using. Here we'll see, of course, that we're using Gaussian. Box, circle and triangle, basically that's just the shape around the pixel area. Either it's a square box that's being blended together, a circle that's blending out in terms of radius, or a triangle that's blending out in terms of radius. Let's switch to triangle, shall we? And let's try this at 3 pixels. There we go. It is perhaps not so easy to make out, but if we look at this line running along here that should be straight, we see that we've got a little up, down, up, down, up, down. It's very slight, but you can see that we've got this little sort of sawtooth to the way that everything's being constructed, right? That's triangle. To get nice smooth edges, most of the time you're going to want to use either circle or Gaussian, and of course filter radii of 1 or less. However, we have got a couple of different ones. We've got Mitchell, and as we can see here, even at higher radius of 3 pixels, right? Although it is over blurring, it's still maintaining a good bit of detail between, the different edges. We can still see the separation lines between these planks in the floorboards and the bits of that nature. Obviously, we're looking very close. If this were 100%, then that's actually not bad, right? So using Mitchell at 1 pixel or even a little over 1 pixel, that can actually help you to clean up some of your AA edges without having to use lots of camera samples. We'll see stuff about the camera samples in a little while. Otherwise, the last one that we have here is Langsos Sync, or Lanchos Sync, however it's pronounced, I don't know. And we see that what we get there is that even at, more than 1 for our filter radius, we're actually getting quite sharp detail coming in here on our anti-aliasing. We'll see if we put this up to 8 and run it again. Then obviously we've gone so high that we are getting a fair bit of blurring, but notice how it's not blurring out the details that we saw before with the Gaussian, right? We see that this beading work on that door, that's still visible. If we come down to 100%, and we can see that it's a very soft render, right? But of course it doesn't particularly look blurry here. And to be honest, the one place that I will say that I think the I'm sorry, I apologise, Polish people. Lanjos sync, it's probably not even Polish, is it? Where this works well is in ArcViz, where of course you often have got, these hard lines and borders between things. I find that using this reconstruction filter, usually not with a filter radius of 8, but perhaps with 1.5 or 2, that can work really well for getting good clean lines in an ArcViz render. It can also be good if you've got some noisy renders, perhaps if you've got a bit of specularity noise, because specular ray traced reflections, especially soft reflections, which are common in ArcViz, they can sometimes suffer a little bit and need lots of sampling to pick them up. But this reconstruction filter combined with a filter radius of 2, 2.5, that can often smooth those out for you and leave it looking really good without actually giving you something that's just blurry and awful. Soft, yes, the edges are soft, not hugely sharp, but again, as you see, that's at a filter radius of 8. If we do this at a more moderate 3 again, then we get something that does look really nice and sharp at a normal sort of level of view, and at regular zoom 100%. But which we can see is still giving us these nice smooth borders along edges of contrast. The one thing I must note for you is that the reconstruction filter here, you'll notice that it's separate on every single buffer, right? So if you're going to be using buffers to combine later in post, or for compositing VFX or something with alpha channel, because the alpha channel has a reconstruction as well for its edges, do make sure you set them all to be the same. The last thing you want is to have different buffers with different reconstruction filters, because of course you set the Lanzosh on one thing, right, and turn this up to 3, and you set Gaussian on something else, which is just the default, and those buffers come out blurred. That's not what you want. You might think that in theory you could sort of mix things up a bit, right? So if you're doing a ray traced soft reflection that's kind of noisy, you could maybe put that buffer as Gaussian and turn it up a little bit so that really blurs off to soften, so as it blends down on top of the other things, and so you've got a nice sharp diffuse and nice sharp shadows, but your blurry reflections are sort of blurred even more. It's just as easy to do that in post, frankly. Get a good render out of Lightwave, and if you are going to blur off buffers, do that in your compositing. At least you'll notice that you can multi-select buffers and switch their reconstruction filter, and that switches all of them. So it's not like you need to go through them one by one. But if you are changing your recon filter, make sure that you do it for any of the buffers that you plan to render. And also keep an eye on how you use the filter radius differently with the different types of reconstruction filter.